Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to this webinar on PDF 2.0 and a few words on PDF X6 as well, which accompanies the PDF 2.0 specification. I'm Freddy Pieters, a solution architect at Enfocus. I've been in the industry for over 37 years now and started off with PostScript. So I saw PDF come to life in the early 90s. I've worked with it almost ever since. First of all, I would like to start with just a little bit of history on PDF. As I mentioned, early 90s, 1993, PDF 1.0 was introduced by Adobe, and we have gradually seen new versions come up over the years up until 1.7. And in those days, it was always managed by Adobe. Adobe was the owner of the format. And whenever there was a new Acrobat version, they also introduced a new PDF version with every time a bit of new functionality. And over the years, as all of you undoubtedly know, PDF has become omnipresent. It has become the de facto standards for document exchange. So it was decided to hand over the PDF specification to the ISO organization. So as of that moment, now we're talking in 2008, the format was officially no longer owned by Adobe, but had become an international standard. But it was based on PDF 1.7. Yeah? So that was there were no changes there. Until 9 years later, in 2017, there was a release of a new ISO specification, PDF, now commonly referred to as PDF 2.0. And that was the first PDF revision that was really developed by ISO, and that where Adobe, of course, they were part of the group that discussed new functionality for PDF 2.0, but it was no longer theirs. 2.0, it sounds like it's a very big step, yeah, and that it could be quite different. Well, the low-level format is still basically the same. So it's still PDF as we know it. And I remember that perhaps 15 years ago or so, there was an attempt by Adobe, some investigation into basing PDF on XML. This has never taken off. That was just an attempt, probably inspired by the efforts that Microsoft did with XPS. But as you all know, that has also never become a very big success. So 2017, that first version. So that's been 7 years now in the meantime. And I have a question for you. What do you think is the PDF 2.0 usage in percentage these days? And quite a lot of you think that it's less than 1%, 26 between 5 to 10. And 8%, more than 10%. Well, at Enfocus, we have customers that sign up for dashboards. So anonymously, we gather information about some of the processing that takes place, and amongst others, the PDF version usage. So we have data for millions, hundreds of millions of files even. And these are the results. Last year, we had 0.008%. Yeah, and the last month, as you can see, well, it seems to be increasing a little bit, yeah, but it's still only 0.01% of the PDF files that are PDF 2.0, which is, of course, a reason for action, I would say. Let's have a look at what PDF 2.0 entails. Now, first of all, the PDF specification, it's a quite thick document, contains a whole lot of things that are not always explained correctly. So there have been lots of documentation changes. So nothing that changes to the specification as such, but just clarifications. There have been substantial rewrites of certain parts of the specification. There have been lots of other smaller things here and there. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them. This is just also to impart to you the fact that PDF 2.0 has really been a lot of work. Yeah? It's not just some aesthetic changes here and there that have been done. But next to these clarifications, also a couple of new capabilities have been added. Yeah, like for example, let me take the third one, 256-bit encryption. Previously, it was 128-bit encryption. Probably most of us will not be concerned by that. The fact 3D measurements and so on, not too bad. But I put them in red. Yeah, I singled out a couple that for the printing industry, because that's basically the audience talking to today, there have been a couple of new capabilities into which I will go into a bit more detail later on. Yeah. And also a couple of new features, like here, the use of black point compensation, also one that I singled out among the other new features that are less like the geospatial features. I mean, in our industry, they do not really concern us. Yeah. Okay, now let's have a look at the first one that I highlighted, page-based output intents. I hope that most of you will know what an output intent is about. Yeah, it's an ICC profile that is embedded in your PDF file, and that defines the media, the type of output for which the PDF file is intended. Hence also, of course, output intent. Yeah. Now, that was document-based. Now, so for certain types of production, if you have, for example, books with a cover in color, black and white pages, and perhaps some plates, as they are sometimes called, with pictures, like in the case of a biography, for example. So you have three different types of paper within one product. Three different types of paper, three different output intents. How do you do that? Well, you couldn't. Yeah, so the only way in which it could be handled was by making sure that you have separate PDFs with separate output intents. Now it's allowed to specify an output intent per page. Of course, it's hierarchically based. So if a page does not have an output intent, then the document output intent is the one that will be assumed. Another new thing related to output intents is the fact that you can reference them. Yeah, as I said, ICC profile embedded in the PDF file. If you have millions of PDF files and they all have the same output intent, it seems like a little bit of a waste of space to include that ICC profile in all these documents. So, plus, of course, also if you want to change that output intent, the ICC profile itself, you would have to update all these documents. So there is now a feature that allows the output intent to be referenced rather than included in the PDF file. And now I have the next question for you. Do you think that this is an interesting feature for you? Yes or no? Or in case if you say, well, I didn't really understand what this is all about, then just say that you're not sure. Yeah, and that gives us some insight into how the audience feels about the new feature. Yeah, we have about 2/3 of the audience that think that this is a interesting new feature. The next topic is halftone origin. What is that, halftone origin? Now, this is a little bit more difficult to explain, but I'll try it with a couple of drawings. When halftoning is about creating printed dots, yeah? And when a rip rips a document or a sheet, it does so by placing all these dots on a grid. And you have a grid that has an origin somewhere, and all these dots, they're all on that grid. Now, suppose that you have a number of labels, for example, that are identical and that are placed somewhere on that grid. What can happen is that screening-wise, and of course here it's a very coarse type of screening, so it is highly exaggerated, of course, yeah. But with what you would normally get is that that where your screen dots start could be different for each of those identical printed parts, yeah. And with changing the halftone origin, you can make sure that the origin is reset so that you have the same type of screening everywhere. Now, what is the usefulness here? There are certain applications, think of security printing, for example, yeah, where you want all those banknotes or all those shares or whatever it may be, but perhaps also for certain brands to do some brand protection that you want to have control over that halftone origin so that you can detect counterfeiting, for example. Yeah. So by changing the halftone origin, you can make sure that identical objects are always reproduced using the same screening origin. And here again, the same question for you. Is this a feature which for your environment is an interesting one? Yes or no? Thank you for your active participation. And I see that, yeah, there's about half who think that this is interesting. Thanks for that. And of course, there are no wrong answers here. Personally, I'm a little bit surprised that it's half of the people that think that this is an interesting feature. But well, now you know that it's there and it wasn't there before. Let's continue with object-based black point compensation. Here is a graph I took from color.org. Black point compensation that has to do with rendering intents. Yeah, so you probably know about these, the absolute, the relative colorimetric, and the perceptual or saturation rendering intent. Well, black point compensation is a variation on the relative colorimetric rendering intent. So here you see in a somewhat exaggerated form what happens in these four different cases. So basically what you have is you have a light point in your source, you have a light point in your target, you have a black point in your source, you have a black point in your target, and they do not necessarily match. So the white in your source could be less white than in your target, or vice versa, and the same for the black point. So how do you compensate that? So you can simply chop it off, like for the absolute colorimetric one, which means that in the midtones everything will be accurate, but in the highlights and the shadows it will be completely off. So there's different techniques, and black point compensation is, according to many people, what gives the best result. But then again, perhaps not always. So what you can do now in PDF 2.0 is that you can specify per object, yeah, what the black point, if black point compensation should be applied or not. Yeah, because I can imagine that some of the people in the audience thought like black point compensation, is that new in PDF 2.0? Of course it isn't, because I've been using black point compensation in my PDF workflow for ages. And yes, you're right, but it was a black point compensation that you used not defined by the PDF format, but by your workflow environment, by your RIP environment. It's there where you specify, okay, I'm going to use black point compensation, but then you use black point compensation for everything. Yeah. Whereas, and that's the nuance that we have with the new PDF 2.0 feature, that is the fact that you can say this image with black point compensation, that image without black point compensation. And again, the question, what does the audience think about the usefulness of this feature? 2/3 who think that this is interesting, and the rest don't think it's interesting or are not sure, which is, of course, valid, because this is a very special kind of feature, of course. Printing order and solidity. Here you see a screenshot of something I took from the internal structure of a PDF file. Yeah? Where we can see that there is in a certain part of the PDF file an array with a printing order that says, okay, first we're going to print Pantone 2141, which is a blue. Then we're going to print Pantone Silver, which is, of course, yeah, silver. And the last one is a Pantone 121, which is a kind of yellow. There's also in the PDF a dictionary that has information about the solidity, because normally printing inks are transparent. So if you print one ink on top of another, they mix and you see another color as a result. But some of them are opaque, like, for example, a silver. Yeah, it could be an ink. It could also be a foil, for example. Yeah, these are opaque things. So if you put those on top of something else, then things will disappear and so on. Yeah. And that's what you can now also define in the PDF, so that you can come to a correct rendering of the document. So here, there are two previews. And now my question to you is, considering the information that you see on the screen, which one of the two is the correct one? The left one or the right one? Of course, assuming that everything is in overprint, and we see that the majority is right. Yeah, the one on the left is wrong, and the one on the right is right. Yeah, because first we lay down the blue, then the silver. So the silver is an opaque one. Look at the solidity, it says 1. Yeah, so it will cover the blue without the blue shining through. Then the yellow is printed on top of the silver, and because the yellow is not solid, so transparent, we see the silver shining through the yellow. So the one on the right is correct, one on the left is wrong. Now, by the way, in Acrobat, what do you see? The one on the left or the one on the right? Well, the one on the left, because Acrobat does not support the correct rendering of print order in combination with solidities. You have to go to other tools in order to get a correct preview. So for everybody working with foils and so on, beware that Acrobat doesn't do that correctly. But at least now in the PDF file, there is a way to describe that a certain ink has a certain type of behavior, transparent or opaque. And of course, here's my question again. Is this an interesting feature for your environment, yes or no? Okay, so a very large majority think that this is, or don't think, know that this is an interesting feature for them. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing your insights. And we can jump to the next one, which is spectral data. Spectral data, aka CXF, color exchange format. Yeah, again, we see a screen capture of the internal structure of a PDF file, yeah, where spectral data is included. And the data of such spectral data looks like, I have to move that over from the other screen. Yeah, so here we're looking at a chunk of CXF. So for people familiar with this, this is XML formatted. Yeah, so it's quite easily readable. And what is in there, there's a reflectance spectrum. That is interesting. Here we see a start wavelength, 380. Light, the visible light, lies between approximately 400 nanometers and 700 nanometers. So if you do a measurement with the spectrophotometer, then it usually gets a little bit of margin, so it measures from 380 to 720. Yeah, and in bands of, depending on the spectrophotometer and the settings, in bands of 5 nanometers or 10 nanometers. Yeah, so here it starts at 380. Yeah, and as you can see, there's a whole bunch of numbers, yeah, that give a value of that particular color across the whole wavelength. Yeah, there's also other additional information like the illuminant. Is it D50? Is it D65? Yeah. Is it a 2-degree observer? Is it a 10-degree observer? Yeah. So all these are things that could be interesting for determining how to render a color in a certain environment, like for rendering it on screen, for a digital printer, for a proofer, for a RIP that creates flexo or offset plates. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So now, why spectral data? Because you could say, well, we have ICC profiles to do that. Well, ICC profiles are based on an LAB color space, and there you have 3 values. You have a value for L, you have one for A, and you have one for B. So you only have 3 values. Whereas here, you measure the whole spectrum. Yeah. So there's a lot more information available for a RIP, a color management software, to do its job. Yeah. So that's certainly the advantage for that. I would like to draw a similarity here with the output intent I mentioned that we talked about previously. You know, here as well, you say, oh, brilliant. Yeah, my data is in the file. So whenever it goes to a RIP or a color management software, that it's there, so it can be used. But yeah, you also have to include it in every file. Yeah, so you have a little bit of the same question that we had with the output intent. Is that the way you want to use it or not? Aren't you better off having a CXF data or some other representation of the spectral data in your RIP and let the RIP handle it? So yeah, there's a bit of a debate in some workflows. The approach whereby spectral data is inserted into the PDF is perhaps to be preferred method. In other cases, perhaps it's better to let other software handle it with its own tools. But again, you can insert that data now into a PDF file. That was previously not the case. So, and again, the question is this an interesting new addition to the PDF specification for you or not? Okay, so we have a majority of yes, not a very big majority, but nonetheless a majority. So again, thank you for sharing your insights. Let's go to the next topic, document part metadata, also aka D part. And again, here a look into the internals of a PDF file to see what could be in there in such a D part. Now, D part, first of all, let me start with this. D part is not completely new. It was already part of the PDF VT specification, and it has now been introduced into PDF 2.0 as well. And if we look at the structure that we see here, we see that the D part is part of a page. So we have the pages dictionary at the top, and then we have those kids and so on. That's internal stuff. Don't worry about that. And then you have the contents of your page, and also, yeah, the media box, for example, that is defined. We see that there's a trim box defined, and there's also D part. Now, PDF does not specify what you have to place in D part. So this opens up a whole set of possibilities. Here we have something with that is based on some specification from SIP4, but in principle, you could put anything in there. You could also add some XMP-like stuff in there. Yeah, what could be the use cases? Well, let's say that you have metadata about the number of copies that need to be produced. It could be that you have a multi-page document that contains multiple products with different unit counts. Yeah, so you could say, I have a D part on page 1 that says 10 copies. I have a D part on page 2 that says 50 copies, and so on. Yeah, it could also be something else like these names that are in there. Could be virtually anything. Yeah, which is quite strong, no? From a certain perspective, because indeed you can add metadata. And for the people who know me, if you get me started on metadata, one of my favorite topics, because I'm first and foremost an automation guy. And if you don't have metadata, then forget about automation. So the more metadata I have, the happier I am. But of course, it always needs, and that's a bit of a problem here for all the features that we're talking about. It takes two to tango. Yeah, I would like to have the metadata in there, but somebody has to put it in there. Yeah. And that's where often things go wrong. Yeah, a piece of software could go to great lengths to say, let's insert a D part into a PDF file. But if there is nobody at the back end who's going to read that information, then yeah, whether it's there or not, it doesn't matter. Yeah, because it's not being used. And also vice versa, you could have software that says, if you give us that metadata, we're ready for it, we're going to use it. But if there's nobody that puts that metadata into the file, then what's the point? So you have to come together. And that's the same with those page output intents, with the black point compensation, with the spectral data. Yeah, if you have a RIP that reads the spectral data, but nobody puts the spectral data in there, then yeah, what have you got? What have you won? You know the drill by now. What do you think of this feature? In the meantime, are there any examples of somebody using dpart in real production? Not personally. There are undoubtedly use cases. There are undoubtedly people that use this, but have not yet come across this personally. Again, we see a majority of the people who think that this is an interesting feature. So again, thank you for your feedback. And for the first time in the history of PDF, we also have a couple of deprecated features. Yeah, so things that are in PDF, but that you're not supposed to. I mean, it doesn't say forbidden. Yeah, deprecated means that we would rather you did not use those features. Yeah. And there are a few that concern us. Certainly, the first one concerns everybody. That's the info dictionary. Yeah. Now, a PDF file has basically two parts. It's a tree structure of the complete document, and an info dictionary. What do you find in that info dictionary? The title, the author, the producer, the application, a couple of keywords, and so on. Yeah. Now, that is information that you also find in the XMP section of a PDF file. And I believe it was with version 1.7. I'm not 100% certain. It was specified in the PDF specification that the XMP has precedence over the info dictionary. Yeah. So if you have a title in your info dictionary and you have a title in the XMP, it's the title in the XMP that counts. Yeah, or that should be taken. Yeah. And what is being said now is that the info dictionary shouldn't even be there anymore. Yeah. Now, this is going to be a funny one, huh? Because, all those PDF producers out there add info dictionaries. I don't see them stop doing this anytime soon. So what are we going to do with PDF 2.0 files that contain an info dictionary? Are we going to flag that as being a problem or not? There have been discussions within the Ghent work group because, as you know, Ghent work group lays down best practices for production, what things files should comply with. And of course, we also have to deal with PDF 2.0, PDFX6, which I will come to in a moment. Then the second one is a stupidity from the PDF specification. Blend modes for transparencies. It was allowed for that to be an array. Yeah, so you could say, color dodge, color burn, what's another one? Multiply. Yeah, so you specify multiple ones, and the specification says that a producer uses the first one that it can deal with. So if the first one is color burn and says, I don't know what color burn is, it simply takes the second one. So it means that your PDF file could be completely different, visualized by two applications because one doesn't understand this blend mode and the other one does. So you can now only define one blend mode per object. Perhaps it's also a theoretical problem because I'm not sure that there were even PDF producers out there that created arrays of blend modes, but at least it's no longer allowed. Then for the older people in the audience, OPI, the Open Prepress interface that was already there in the days of PostScript. And it seemed like this was a good idea to have a similar type of functionality in PDF. But it has now been decided that this is no longer valid, and OPI references in PDF 2.0s are deprecated. And the same for the TrapNet annotation. Perhaps if I also go to a PDF file here, and if I look at the properties of the file, here, that's what I was talking about here. That's in the info dictionary and possibly also in the XMP, which you see here. When you look under advanced, there is a trapped key. That's the TrapNet key that I was referring to. So it can be set to yes or no or to unknown. Now, incidentally, in PDFX, the presence of the TrapNet annotation was mandatory. Yeah, you had to specify it, but everybody specified it as no or unknown because nobody used it. So here as well, it was decided if nobody uses it, let's get rid of it. Of course, I'm not going to ask you now whether you like the deprecated features or not, because you shouldn't be using them anymore in the first place. Then PDFX6, which of course is based on PDF 2.0. What did you think? Yeah. And there's more to it than in these next 4 lines, but I singled out those as being the most striking differences compared to previous PDFX versions, namely that now annotations are allowed inside Trimbox. Yeah, on condition that they have what is called an appearance stream. Digital signatures are allowed, form fields are allowed, and these reference output intents, I already referred to that previously. They are also allowed in PDFX6. And I'm sure that in the Ghent work group, we have a meeting not next week, week after next, that this is going to be another topic just to see what we're going to do with whether as Ghent work group we need to come up with more stringent specifications than what is defined in PDFX6. Yeah? To give a practical example, yeah, we have the spectral data. Yeah, one of the obvious extensions that we could define for the use of PDFX6 in a production environment that is that when there is spectral data for a certain spot color, that spot color must also be present in the file. Otherwise, why would you put it in there? I think all of you have enough experience with PDF in the meantime to know that you can find the weirdest kind of stuff in PDF files and that it's not always correct. More on that certainly in the future. Now, application support, because this is a big problem. If we look at support for PDF 2.0, we have seen the percentage in the beginning for a specification that is now 7 years old. Its usage is very, very, very low. And that is simply because the application support isn't there. Yeah, I'm happy to see that for most of the features, new features that I presented, the feedback from the audience was, oh yeah, this is an interesting feature. So what everybody should be doing is put pressure on vendors of all the different tools out there to implement support for these features. If we think of Adobe, we hardly see anything move in that area. Different output intents for different pages. Well, it starts with the authoring application. If InDesign does not allow you to specify that the first and the second and the last but one page have to have output intent so and so, and the other page is another output intent, well, if InDesign doesn't allow you to define that, then they're not going to put that into the PDF. It certainly starts there. So I think that most pressure has to go into that direction. In terms of pre-flight tools, the 2 leading products, Callas PDF Toolbox and Enfocus Bitstop, support for 2.0 is there, both for reading it and for adding things to the file to make it a PDF 2.0. There are also color management solutions out there that can work with the spectral data that is embedded in PDF files. So, and also RIPs that have support for PDF 2.0, but it's certainly not everywhere yet. But I think that if the authoring applications don't start implementing the possibility for users to use features that require the use of PDF 2.0, then it's not going to happen. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, except for any other Q&A. Yeah, of course. Yeah, one side coated, the other side uncoated. I mean, that type of stock exists, because you could say, yeah, if you have 2 pages, then the output intent for the 2 pages would be the same. Yeah, for the majority of substrates, that would be the case. But so for the majority of cases, that would be so. Yeah, I would say so. Especially if you think about textile printing and so on, that there the use of spectral data could be quite interesting. As long as you go for paper substrates, it's perhaps less of an issue. But if you start going toward the more bizarre substrates, well, bizarre in a certain way, that's an interesting question, because indeed PDFX4 is based on PDF 1.7, I believe. I saw something quite interesting a couple of months ago. There was an OCR application that gave you the option to save the generated output, which is basically an image and then some text in the file using a certain PDF version. And PDF 2.0 was in the list. So I thought, wow. So you simply choose 2.0 and it creates a PDF 2.0. Now, creating a PDF 2.0 as such is not difficult because a PDF file, if you look at the bytes, if you look at the starting bytes of a PDF, it says %PDF and then major version dot minor version. So creating a PDF 2.0 version file is very easy. You simply let the file start with %PDF 2.0 and it's a PDF 2.0 file. And many people think, yeah, the higher the version, the better it is. That's wrong. Having higher version numbers is probably a good idea for software because you want the software to be in the latest state with latest bug fixes, with the latest features and so on. For formats, you want it to be the other way around. You want to try and save the file in the lowest possible format so that your file can be read by as many applications as possible. You have the risk if you process a PDF 2.0 file in a PDFX4 environment that the environment will say, oh, sorry, we're going to do our best, but we're not sure that we will be able to process everything. It is very well possible that your PDF 2.0 file does not really contain 2.0 features, or that it uses 2.0 features, like, for example, the spectral data, but that you don't care about the spectral data, in which case you could process the file, nothing bad would happen. But of course, conceptually, it's not okay. It's always best to create it to the lowest possible format version. Any changes in PDF specification regarding dimensions, min and max? No. Now, perhaps this is also an opportunity to do away with another misunderstanding about dimensions. PDF is not limited to 200 inch by 200 inch. You can create PDF files that are kilometers big. The 200 by 200 inch limitation is an Acrobat limitation. So there have been no changes in the PDF specification regarding dimensions. Are we going to support it? Undoubtedly. What's the time frame for it? I cannot make a statement on this right now, but as I mentioned before, in 2 weeks, we have a Ghent workgroup meeting, and I'm sure that this will be one of the topics, and we will be able to say more about that, hopefully after the meeting. But rest assured, as soon as the Ghent workgroup has come up with profiles and specifications that support PDFX6, that will be announced. PDF 2.0 doesn't change anything with regards to PDF VT. Okay, I thank you for your presence, for the sharing of insights as to the new features in PDF 2.0, and I wish you a nice rest of the day.